What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Dragon Age 2. Wow, what a game. Now, here's an interesting thing I want to start this video off with. So I played this game back in very early October. Now, you guys are seeing it much later, and in fact, you guys are seeing this after the Veilguard comes out, which is, kind of puts me in a weird spot, but we're going to make it work. So I just kind of wanted to make that known. I don't know how I'll feel about this game post the Veilguard. I don't know if this will make the Veilguard better for me, worse for me. I guess I will know that, but not in this video, okay? But, it honestly gives us an opportunity to judge this game as it deserves to be judged. On its own, many years later, does the game hold up? Does the game deserve the bad scores? You look at this thing right now, and it's got a 79, I believe, on Metacritic from critics, and I think it's got under a 5. I think it's like 4.9 or 4.7. Got crushed from users. And, user scores can be very misleading, especially on the Metacritics of the world. I think Steam is generally the best place for user scores, but you look at some of the reviews and they're legit. They're not 0 out of 0 just because. They are 4s and 3s, and there's people that actually typed out some really reasonable thoughts of this game. Now, I played Origins back, way back in the day. Probably not 2009, but maybe like a year or two later. And then I did play Dragon Age 2. Now, I didn't play 2 all that much. So for me, I don't want to say playing it for the first time because, I played parts of this already. But, I jump in and I have forgotten, besides Hawk, everything else I kind of forgot about. And, I knew, the combat got a little bit of, a upheaval and stuff, but didn't know too much about this game going into it literally right now. And I am mixed. I was really trying to think, try to put all my thoughts together in my head before I record this video. I feel like we're going to do it as this video goes. In a lot of ways, I really do love this game. I think even there's bad elements to it that I kind of don't mind, that I kind of am like, I don't know if I would want all games to do it, but it's like, the way that the quest structure is kind of broken, it's very go here, do this, go there, turn it in, go here, and it's just, and it's such a small scale for, I guess, what it's really trying to do that, I don't know, it almost felt kind of refreshing in that way, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you're going to these same areas 50 times, and a lot of them really don't have a lot to kind of pull you in. It's okay, some places, some games only have 5-10 locations, right? But if they're really good and they really pull you in, you don't mind that it's like that. In fact, Dragon Age Origins is a great example of that. There's not that many places to go in Origins. And at the same time, kind of the hub worlds, right? The major faction kind of locations, they're really deep. You can be there forever, and you can find different places to go in that. You can find all these side quests that are directly attached. In this one, it's more like you find a person in X place, and then they tell you that you have to go to one of the other 12 places that you've already been 50 times, and now all of a sudden, again, in one of those places, you're going to find a new quest, or there's going to be a new bandit, camp that captured somebody and you play it. So, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but in terms of my overall thoughts, I did like a good amount of this game, and we'll talk about that. And then also, yeah, you can tell it was rushed. Now, it had to be rushed. In terms of the history, I really only want to mention this, and we'll jump into kind of the individual moments. The history, I believe, is they had 16 or 17 months to put this game together. So they had less than a year and a half, or let's say around it. And, you've had, the Batman Arkham Origins of the world pull it off, and I think Mass Effect 3 was made in an incredibly short amount of time. Number one, games just, I don't even want to know what a game looks like after a year and a half nowadays, right? There wouldn't even be a freaking game. Even a game like Gollum, I think, took 3 years. I mean, the people didn't really know what they were doing, but it took them 3 years, I think, for Gollum. So, I do want to say that there are issues, but at the same time, you look back so many years later, and I mean, that is what hindsight gives you, right? I don't know, we're in a different situation now. The expectation for Dragon Age 2 right now is definitely not the same at the time, right? Coming after Origins, and it's like, okay, Origins is phenomenal. Origins is really, really good. Amazing storytelling, amazing world building, high-stake events, awesome companions, whether it's Morrigan or Alistair or any of them, and so then you go into this, and I imagine now for me, I don't even think I had expectations, and I probably didn't really have them now either, which probably helps it. But, all those things are things you kind of have to think about. So, it's something we'll explore as this video goes on. Does it deserve the hate? I mean, in some ways, the game isn't great, and there's some weaknesses that I would like to call out, but I also think it's better in some areas than you might think it is. So it's kind of a mix of like these different video titles and themes that I've done in the past. So okay, let's focus on some of the good stuff. So for me, I actually am going to take the game side when it comes to the story and the characters. I've seen a lot of divisiveness over like those kind of things. Now, let me say one thing. I don't think the story is particularly amazing. I don't think it's nearly as good as Origins. I don't think the companions are as good as Origins. However, I think the complexity and the depth and what you're able to do with them, this is more in line with what you think when I think of Mass Effect 2, which was kind of my coming of age story with BioWare. You know, that's really where I discovered them. I was like, man, I think it may have been the first game I played of them, but it's like, this is a video game. This is how you do it. And just the structure, right? The structure of like how you take on these quests and how they kind of build and the relationships with these characters and stuff like that. That's where it came together for me. But you know what? A lot of that DNA is in Dragon Age 2 because they spend a lot of time. There are multiple times you will go to these companions and build and build and build. I mean, and you might actually fall back. And, you know, a lot of these choices stack. And I don't even think the first time I played it, I got to anything of consequence. But I got it where, like, everybody, except for Anders, they all stood with me. You know, and even him, it's because of the situation, not necessarily because of what I did. But it's like, you know, everybody stuck close to me. You know, there were times where people were going to ditch me, and I pulled off the right decision-making. I got to the conclusion of a lot of their quests, and their quests are good. They are very good. So while, you know, like I like Varric a lot. I like Isabella actually was my romantic interest in this. And it's like they're good. They're all really, really strong characters. I just don't think they're as strong as the first one. But, you know, the complexity and the storytelling that they do, all of them, you know, they have some deep stories. They have their moments where it's like, okay, this is the final part of your act, right? And you have to take this character to do a thing. And they're pretty big events. They're pretty big moments for every single character that you do it with. I mean, you don't have to, and depending on how it goes, characters can come and leave. But, you know, I really want to say, like, I like that quite a bit. I think that the systems is what I really respect, I think, looking back. And, you know, the story, I think, is both good and bad, because I think it suffers from pacing. You know, going in, I was like midway through Act 2, and I wanted to look up, like, well, where was I in the game? Like, how far am I in? And I looked at, like, the mission list, and I looked at just, like, the length, like, a general walkthrough. And I saw a lot of people talking about how, and you could see it from the mission list, Act 1 is enormous. I don't know where, I don't know the mentality of the pacing there. Because Act 1 is so freaking long. Act 2 is shorter, but it's still long. And Act 2 really feels like a conclusion. And I mean, here's the thing. They're all conclusions because they're all time jumps, right? Like you do Act 1, you jump. I think each one is maybe roughly 2 or 3 years that you jump ahead of time. And so you do Act 1, you jump. You do Act 2, you jump. And then you do Act 3. And they all feel kind of secluded. And I think, okay, in terms of the positive of what I like, it feels more personal. Like some things are actually above Hawk, but, you know, you are present and you are kind of actively growing your status as the game goes. And the time jumps kind of help that. Because even with, like, your companion characters, right? Like, these are characters that have lives. These are characters that maybe have left for those 3 years and then came back. These are characters that have jobs and they're doing things and then, you know, and they're still with you, but, you know, you can kind of feel like time has gone by. So I actually think that works really, really well. And in order to keep it personal, I think that was probably the right choice. But then it's like, okay, well, Act 2 really feels like the end of the game. You really feel like Act 2, it's over, because it kind of like comes to a head and you make your main decisions. And then Act 3 is so short. You know, yeah, it's kind of the wrap-up of all of the companion quests, at least the way I don't know if you can, like, force the companion quest to do it in Act 2. I don't think you can. So it's the ending to a lot of things, sure, but it's the start of a new, like, situation. You know what I mean? And it's a bigger situation than Acts 1 and 2, but then at the same time, it's much shorter than, like, you do one thing for each of them, and then I'm pretty sure you pick a side and you're done. Like it's so, I guess there's the build-up first, right? There's the build-up between these two factions. Then you have to do quests for each side, one after the other. and then you have to pick a side, and then you finish the game. I mean, that's pretty much the third act of it. And again, like there are impactful moments. There are times where you feel powerful, and there's times where you feel like your choices are powerful. And I felt, again, like a lot with the companions, a lot of these decisions were like major ramifications, which honestly I didn't really feel in the first game. I felt like in the first game I had a pretty good hang of things until one random thing would happen. I picked the wrong choice, and then I kind of like my story in one fell off the rails rather quickly and very much at the end of the game. Like, I held it together, unlike this game. This game I felt like I was always somewhat in control, but there was always the chance where I was going to like make somebody mad, and like I didn't know if I was going to make the right choices, because I've played Dragon Age Origins and I've seen it more times than I have Dragon Age 2. So 2, I just had a different kind of feel to it. But I did have that same experience where it's like, okay, these choices do feel powerful. I think it's just the way that they told it. So, I don't know, kind of like a catch-22. I enjoyed the story. I think each of those acts were powerful, and I liked, again, Hawke's like rising of the ranks. Like, he goes in and, he has to get into the city through just like hopefully goodwill, like somebody just kind of lets you in, and then you kind of have to start to build. Well, actually, because of that, you almost owe a debt, right? And then you build your status, and as you go into Act 2, Act 3, you get like title changes and things like that, and I really like that. I think that's a really, really cool thing. It's just that when you do that, and it is personal, kind of, because you're kind of living through these events, they feel so separate, and they don't, the magnitude of power is off, right? Because, again, like Act 2, Act 3 is more powerful, but Act 2 is longer, and it's more drawn out, and it also feels like an ending when you're playing it. And then you get to Act 3 and say, oh, this isn't the end of the game, which I knew because I saw the mission list, so I was a little biased, I guess, in that way. Another thing I massively loved is the gameplay. I think... it's very divisive in the Dragon Age community about how the gameplay works, right? And are we going in a better or worse direction? Now, I remember really liking Inquisition's combat, maybe controversially, depending on who you are. I really liked Inquisition's combat, and I am excited for the Veilguard. Again, now, at the time you see this video, like, we're already playing it, but so it's a little off, so don't take my word for it. But, I remember also liking Dragon Age 1. And then, I did a Dragon Age Origins retrospective on this channel. I'll leave it in a link in the description if you want to check it out. And I like that combat too. It's strategic. It is. Now, here's the thing. I played it on PS3 and I played it on disc. That's what I played Dragon Age Origins. And the game ran about as bad as any game I've ever played in my life. And you can watch that video. I'm not exaggerating. I can't believe how bad it was. Now, the better idea was to do it on Xbox, and that's what I did here. So Dragon Age 2, I have the disc, so I played it on Xbox Series X using the 360 disc. So I had confidence it was going to work, and the frame, oh my god, buttery smooth. I mean, honestly, it ran really well, and the reason why this is important, if a game has some hiccups and frame rate, you're talking about games in the early 2010s, late 2000s, right? I'm not going to hold it too much against it, and I really didn't for Origins either. But that's very important when it comes to the combat, because the combat immediately in this game feels so freaking good. So I like to play as mage. I did that in Origins, and I did that here. And, they start you in a battle. They start you kind of like a wave system, which is the entire game, which we'll talk about in a second. But immediately I was like, it's silky smooth, in terms of just because I wasn't used to it because of the frame rate thing. So I'm like, oh, thank God the game can handle itself. And then number 2, I just love the kind of responsiveness of the combat. I thought it was phenomenal. And, I was pushing it, as a mage, leveling up and getting to level 20, 21, 22, and getting these, like, the massive firestorms and the electricity kind of field situation. I mean, it looked good, it ran good, and it played good. And so I just want to shout that out because I think, again, it is divisive of, like, have we gone in a better direction with the combat? I like the tactical stuff. I can like the slower nature of Dragon Age Origins, but honestly, like, replaying it the way that I am, and I might try to get to Inquisition, like, in the current time that I'm in recording this. I want to try to get to Inquisition before the Veilguard. The combat did get better. I really believe that it did not peak with Origins. Right now, it's peaked with 2. I remember liking Inquisition, but I barely played 2. So now I've played 2 a lot of hours. Now I kind of want to, be able to compare and contrast them. So I really love it. And, I think the leveling system is really great. I felt strong in my own like opinions of like which abilities I want each character to use. I would swap a little, but honestly I mainly stayed as Hawk, and I played on normal, so like the companions did their thing and we did it pretty darn well. I didn't really have struggles throughout the game. I really enjoyed the combat, really enjoyed the abilities. I thought the mage was freaking awesome, but all of them, I would try to have like warriors with me. Varric was kind of always a lock. Again, Isabella would kind of come in every so often, and the rogue is really cool as well, especially as they get more power. All of the characters, when they get more powerful, become extremely cool, but the combat is extremely good. In fact, I would probably say consistency and just quality, the combat is the best thing in this game. Like, just that's the best trait that this game has. Now, when it comes to like the enemies and the structure of it, there are challenging enemies, and like the bosses, I think, in this game are really cool. Fighting some dragons, which I did, and I struggled with that in the first game, but I pulled it off here. There can be some good enemies, but this is where I think the rushing thing kind of comes in a couple different ways. So I mentioned earlier in terms of the locations, right? That was just, it did become repetitive. It became repetitive to go on the same blank roads over and over and over. There's a couple locations that are not like city based, right? And they're kind of like dungeons where they're just really, really big. They'll have their kind of zigzag patterns, right? You can follow them through. And then, as time goes on and as you get quests, they'll just start to drop quests in there. But you will have to go to these places 10, 15 times, probably even more than that, to be honest. And it gets very repetitive. Also, as you go through, sometimes you'll trigger automatic, enemies. And the entire game is really based off of waves. So you could, sometimes, you'll get like a group of enemies that you kind of just trigger, right? And you'll fight them and you'll be done. Most times, especially really any side quest, any main quest, any companion quest, you are going to have to face waves and waves. Then you'll walk 50 feet. You'll get your loot. You have the little exploration. You'll have, your codex pages, stuff like that. But, for the most part, you face a group of enemies, couple waves of them where they're not there. You think you're done with a pack, and then all of a sudden they'll throw another pack at you, and then you walk 50 feet and you do it again. And that really did disappoint me, because that pacing, I mean, it has pace, I suppose. You know what to expect. It's just not good pacing, right? And it's interesting because like they really beat the greatest aspect of this game. They kind of beat it to death, because like the fighting is good, and I would say, I don't know, to me the fighting never really got stale, so I guess like I'm not super anti. I guess I can't be that anti how they did it, because I still liked fighting. I guess though I liked fighting because I wanted to keep leveling up to get more abilities, to see what those abilities could do. And the more you level up, maybe I'll have more health, so I'll be able to survive later encounters. Right? I had to try to be smart because I was playing on normal. I don't know if I enjoyed, in fact, I think I can say I didn't enjoy the wave after wave. And I think it just kind of compounds, right? It's more about going to the same area 20 times and then facing waves of enemies 20 times. If it was one or the other, I think it would be more okay, but it was both, and that kind of added up. But, I would say, in that way, that was probably the weakest element to it, right? Is the rushing mentality. At times, the pacing of it kind of being off in terms of the storytelling. Those are the big weaknesses. I would also say maybe earlier on in the game, I didn't really like the way they were doing like the loot system. And I mean, I'm not a big loot guy. I'm not a big, like I get like the cool or the higher geared armor, and like that's the one I wear. I don't think about it too much. It's not like a big part of games for me. It's just not a big aspect. But at the same time, I just feel the way even like the UI was for like 1 compared to this one, I think was massively downgraded here. I also think, while the abilities of your companions was cool and some of the customization for them, not all. Like, you are really, so much of what you get, loot, can be used on you. And it just, I don't know, it didn't, even the way it looks, even the way the gear boxes looked. And I don't know, like, it just felt like you would get the same kind of stuff. Nothing really felt like, eventually you would get almost like your epic or your rare, like the color coding kind of stuff. But that actually took a while. And then even when you get it, they don't pop out. I don't really know if I'm explaining right, because again, I'm not really into it, but maybe I am more than I think I am, because like playing it, I kept noticing it and thinking, just the way they handled the visuals, the UI, the loot system, being able to customize your companions way more in 1 than you can in 2. Like, those are things I noticed, so maybe actually I do care, more than I think I do. But that was another thing that kind of bugged me, throughout the game. So, I don't know. I mean, at the end of it, here we are. I walked myself through 20 minutes talking about it, and the game is strong. I would recommend this game to people now. I think the game, in a lot of ways, does hold up. And it's just, like, for me, it was kind of about the whole experience carrying its weight. I think what I saw in some of the reviews was, like, 1 or 2 elements that would, like, massively, kind of drop this game from people's perspective. And I can get it. I mean, again, I don't think the story is as good. I don't think the companions are as good. I do think the systems are better. I feel like it has weight where it needs to. I think the pacing is a little off, but it's more personal towards Hawk. So it's kind of a give or take, but I do think as a package deal, the game is good. And I will say, I mean, in terms of, like, I don't do ratings myself when I review games on my main channel podcast now. I don't do that stuff because I what's the difference between an 8, 8.1, 8.2? I just don't understand any of that stuff. But, for me, 7.9, right? 79 is what the game from critics was, I believe, on Metacritic. And again, the user score was below a 5. Is this game a bad game? Is this game a 3 or a 4 or 5? No, I don't think so, literally at all. I think this game probably is in that 7 to 8 range, and Origins is probably just a little bit higher than it, maybe a lot higher depending on who you are, but I think the gameplay does get massively overhauled in this game, which gives it an advantage, but a lot of the other things, step back. But so far, so good. I'm liking going back into this franchise. And, again, when you were watching this, the Veilguard is out. I will do a video on Inquisition before the end of this year. It'll be kind of out of order because of everything that's going on, but I do want to do that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about Dragon Age 2. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.